Hey, welcome back to the Pod Podcast. Host Jeremy Todd. Glad you were tuning in. Love my Wednesday interviews, and today's going to be no different. And it's interesting. I was talking to my guest Gina just a second ago about some of the guests I get on the show and some of the requests I get to get on the show. I get quite a few different requests. And I was telling Gina, it's interesting because I don't like to have, I'm very selective of the people that I have on my show. I want people that have like real stories, that have been through some real struggles. And again, hey, I get it. There's a lot of great people out there that may not have been through a real struggle. I get it. It's all good. But the people that I want on my show that have been through some stuff and have come on the other side of it, and that's what's super, super important to me. Now, as many of you have known, and hopefully you have read my book, The Positive Side, How I Overcame Bullying, Bankruptcy, and the Bad Attitude to really, truly find who I am as an individual. But if you haven't really read that book, read it. There's some deep stuff in that book. And I get into it and I talk about some of the areas when I was a younger kid and I was sexually abused as a younger kid. And it was very, very traumatic. And until I wrote this book, probably... Well, it's kind of weird, Gina, and I'm sorry I'm boring you with this story right off the bat, but over the summer when I was writing the book, and I'm writing this stuff out. I've never told a soul in my entire life, and I'm writing this out, and the emotions that are rushing through my head that I've dealt with for, I'm 42 now, so I've dealt with these things for 30 years. I mean, it's a long time, and it's weird how the mind works. I remember these things like they happened yesterday. And then when you reached out, I noticed that, obviously you've overcome some trauma as well. And I know trauma comes in many different forms, many different ways. And my question, and again, I've got Gina DeFay on the show. So Gina, first of all, welcome to the show. I don't mean to go deep on you that quick, but welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Do you ever really, truly recover from trauma?
I don't think that you really recover from it. I think you learn how to maneuver through it. And heal. But I think that different things come up in our lives that pull us back there. At least that's been my experience.
It makes sense. It's just, it's interesting because when you don't, I think part of the process of writing the book was interesting because I was working my way through it. And now that it may sound cliche and I'm not trying to sound like that guy, but as I put that message out there and this weight has come off my shoulders, I just feel more free. And I'm just kind of curious when you talk about, overcoming trauma and what you do. And obviously we're going to get into how people can find you and your book and all that good stuff. But how do you overcome trauma? Like what were some of the things that you would go through? And what would you recommend someone to work their way through it?
Yeah, I think the first thing is acknowledging it. I ran from it for years and years and years. And I always said, well, I'm positive. I have a really good outlook on life and I mean well in everything that I'm doing, but I didn't stop and really deal with it. And in fact, I was having a conversation last night with a good friend of mine. And I said to him, we were talking about this trauma and therapy and going to therapy and getting through things. And I said, I just remember turning 50 and having some incident happen. And I just was like, you have got to be kidding me. Like this was over 40 years ago that this happened to me and it's still there. Like when will it finally be over? And that's when I was like, maybe I do need to go back and do some more in-depth therapy. Cause I had done, therapy when I needed it for little topical situations, but it was like, I just need to dive back in and really like accept that, it was still affecting my life. Yeah. It was still pulling me back. So I think that's the biggest thing is just owning it and knowing that if you can, jump into it, go through it, do the hard parts, do the work, you can get to that other side and at least have a little more peace.
I agree with that. Do you mind sharing what your trauma was? What was your trauma in childhood?
Yeah. So, my trauma was 5 years of living as an only child with my mom and my stepdad. My stepdad molested me, during 3 of those 5 years. And that's bothered me. But what's really been hard for me is that my mom was there when it happened. And she knew it was happening. They used to leave me at home alone. I was 8 years old and I would come home from school and I didn't know if there was going to be a party going on, which, a lot of times turned into, I've seen my mom get gang raped by 5 or 6 men when I walked in the door from coming in from school. I didn't know if they weren't going to be home when I got home. And they might come home at midnight or they might not come home for 5 or 6 days. So, I went through 5 years of that. And I was going through my own puberty at the time. And so then my stepdad was trying to, I believe, trying to prostitute me out. He was trying to get me to sit on his friends' laps and drink with the parties and, all of those kind of things. So that's where my trauma was from about age 8 to 13.
How do you find strength after that? Like, take me through, like, because again, this podcast reaches, 200 countries around the world, and we're all in different genres. And how do you how do you process that as a teenager? I mean, I guess, and then into your 20s, and then becoming like, what are some of the things that went through your head, and how did you overcome them? Because you talk a lot of times about, having this trauma, but still building a better life outside of that trauma.
Yeah.
How do I mean, that sounds so obvious. How do you do it? Because
Yeah.
again, me outsider thinking like, oh my God, I can't imagine that. Like I mean, there's no other better word than trauma going through that. Like, how do you process that as a child, and how do you build a better life?
Yeah. So I don't think I processed it as a child. At one of the parties when I was about 12, there was a man that saw me for about an hour, and I wrote a book, and that's what the book is about this one encounter with this man that spent an hour with me, and I was in full on I have to protect myself mode, so terrified of everybody, because again, I remember I was an only child in this house with these crazy adults. And he saw me for an hour and he told me everything was going to be okay. He spent an hour with me, and that changed my life. I remember waking up the next day and thinking to myself, well, if there's one good person out there, there's more. There just has to be more. And his words of even just saying, you're going to be okay, everything will be all right. I believed it. And, maybe really naive, but I just needed any little thread of hope at that point. And so I don't have a lot of memories from that time from a timeline perspective, but sometime in the next year, I asked my dad if I could go and live with him. And he was like, yeah, come on. And I remember thinking, well, that was way easier. Like, why haven't I done this earlier? Why didn't that happen earlier? So I went to live with my dad. And it was a different type of chaos, but it was safe. My dad came home every day. They made dinner. He was just starting a relationship with my stepmom. She had 3 kids. I had never been around sibling rivalry, there was other chaos going on. And I was like for me, it was like walking out of a war zone and nobody knew, nobody knew what I had been in this war. And I'm just trying to stay safe in this home. And that's just kind of what I transitioned to, that, okay, well, there's food on the table and the doors lock at night and there's no parties here. And, let me just focus on all the positive things. And I went through really the next 10 years with that mindset. When I got married was the first time I thought, I probably should go get some therapy. I was molested. Now I'm married. That could be a problem.
Sure, yeah.
Not realizing all of the other problems that were there. I was trying to be very practical. But the one thing I knew is I wanted to have kids and I wanted to break a pattern. I did not want to be like my mom. And this was generational. My mom's father was an alcoholic. There were problems in that, with her family as well. I just didn't want to do it that way. I wanted to raise my kids and give them a great life and be a great mom.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, not to get into the religious aspect or anything funky like that, but there's a lot of beliefs that we're in this world for specific reasons, for specific purpose, and one of the reasons that we're on this world is to break patterns and generational problems. Whether it's abuse, whether it's drug abuse, whether it's this or that or the other thing. And then and as you're on this planet and you're in this body or whatever this or the form that we're in, as you break these patterns into your life, it allows you to get to the next level in life. And sometimes I feel that it comes out to where when you break this pattern in life and you get to the next level, your next level is this whole new life that maybe all these other generations that was there, but they never had a chance to break that pattern. Then here you are breaking that pattern. And then what it's going to do for future generations of your family, your children, your grandchildren, your grandchildren's children. I mean, it's amazing what happens when you continue to fight over this, fight through the adversity in your life. Recently, I had Keisha on my show. If you haven't heard that show, Gina, you gotta go check it out. It was amazing. But she talked about some of the similar things when she was abused and just she battled cancer and gave up her son for adoption. And we talked about just going through this, and kind of what you're talking about is just getting through it. And then, and constantly, it almost looks like that someone came into your life, whether it be a guardian angel or someone that was there for a specific reason, allowed you to get out of this funk that you're in and just open that door to show you that there is greatness within. And it's just a very powerful story. So I appreciate you bringing it up, and I appreciate being so vulnerable. And one thing that really glares out to me is how powerful you talk about it, and you sharing these experiences. I know it's changed lives all around the world, and I know it's going to change lives listening to this podcast. Now, you wrote the book, The Parakeet Drawing, a memoir. I want you to talk a little bit about that book. Two questions about the book. Number one, why did you write the book? Well, three. Why did you write the book? What's the book about? And then how did you grow in the process of writing the book?
Sure. Okay. So I wrote the book, going back to the religious part that you brought up. I really felt like God told me to write the book. I was in my kitchen and it was like, you're going to write a book. And, I say all the time, I was like, well, I can barely write a sentence, so I'm not sure how that's going to happen.
I know the feeling, Olivia. I know the feeling.
Not the plan.
That's funny.
Not the plan. And it was just weighing on me that that's what I was supposed to do. And so, and I'll go back a little bit, Jeremy. So my whole life, especially in my career, for the last 30 years in the career that I'm in, people are drawn to me. And what I have found is it's like perspective. I'm very empathetic because I understand people go through things, but I'm also like, so you're going to stay there or are you going to move forward? And it's hard. There are hard conversations, but I have found that people will come to me when they want that hard conversation. And so I wanted to, when I knew I needed to write this book, what I really wanted to write were books on like overcoming stuff and believing in yourself and getting through the hard things. But I hadn't shared my real story of my childhood really ever. I'd given little glimpses of it. And so I just felt like the only way to really have any maybe authenticity around, I can speak about it because I've been through it, was to write the memoir. So that's what the Parakeet Drawing is. It's a memoir of my life from, being a child up until about a year and a half ago, and the journey that I have been through to get to the point that I'm at now. I can't remember what the third question that I answered.
How did you grow as writing the book? Because when I wrote my book, and my book coach asked me that similar question, and it was just fascinating. It allowed things to slow down, and it allowed me to work through things emotionally that I don't think I would have ever worked forward or worked through myself without that physical thing of actually typing out exactly what was in my head. It was a weird, surreal feeling. And I'm just more for me, selfishly, I'm just curious about how you grew through the process of writing your book.
Yeah, absolutely. Mine was exactly the same. Again, it wasn't a plan to do it. And I had been giving out little bits of information along my life. But I always was worried about making other people uncomfortable. It was like, if I say everything, you're going to be uncomfortable. If I don't say everything, I'm going to be uncomfortable because I'm pretty authentic. And so when I wrote the book, I thought, well, I'm just going to really put it all out there. I'm going to allow myself, first of all, to go back and really write it out. And like I said, I don't have continuous memories. And so it was dumping out, okay, here's a day I remember, or here's a time frame I remember, here's an incident I remember, and just getting it all out that I can remember typing it out and thinking, Jesus, how did I get through that? Yeah. Like, wow, that was really bad, because I was so like gung ho, let's just change the world, and change these patterns, that I hadn't really allowed myself to mourn the little girl, to mourn the loss. I was very open about, I didn't have a childhood. I could talk about that, but I'm very practical. And so to write it and to mourn that little girl, to go back through, I have a few pictures. I don't have a lot of pictures of me when I was little, but I had a box that I got from my mom when she passed away recently that I was really worried about going through because it brings up so many memories. But to be able to go through it, and there was one picture in there that I don't remember it. It's me, and it's a school picture, and I don't even remember that little girl. And I carried that around the house with me for about a month while I was writing, trying to connect back with her. and remember her. And that's just been refreshing. I thought it was hard, and I thought it was just going to be traumatizing more, but it wasn't for me. It really I just purged it. I got it all out. It was very raw. In fact, when I wrote it all down, I went back and cleaned it up maybe a little bit more, just so it wasn't, if my kids read it, that's what I kept thinking. I don't know if some of this stuff needs to be that raw, but the first draft was definitely all laid out.
Let's get, we're speaking with Gina Zafay, author of the Parakeet Drawing, a memoir. As you're talking about that, well, first of all, I'm just so proud of you for doing it, because I think sometimes, and obviously we don't really know each other, but I think sometimes even hearing from anybody that I'm very, very proud of you. And I think that's amazing what you've done, because you don't understand. Well, you talk about this a little bit, and we're going to get into about the power of, doing small positive things for other people, and what that does for the butterfly effect and how that affects other people's lives. And I'm going to have you talk about that in just a second. But, when you do write that book, the impact that you're going to have is generational in itself. Because when you write a book that's so powerful, and what I love about you is that you're very authentic and real. I go back to when I initially talked about the podcast, when I have people on here that are, well, I don't have them on here because I just don't want fake story. I want people that are real, that are authentic, and that authenticity comes across through your voice and through your stories. And it's so important to hear, because there are people in this world that are going through this right now, that are in the middle of this, that don't know how to get out of it, that don't know what to do, that maybe even want to end their lives, and understanding that they just want the pain to stop. And here you are, continue to go through it 30, 40 years later, and look at your life now. It's just, there needs to be more stories like this that get out there, that tell these stories, because again, I say it over and over again, there are so many people going through these things right now. I mean, literally, as they're listening to it, they might be listening in their bedroom, crying themselves to sleep, thinking there's no way out of it. And here you are, got out of it, and successful, and telling your story and being authentic, and understanding that there's pain there too. And I think that's important too, is like accepting the pain. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's not the end either. There's a life ahead of you that needs to be lived, and there's lives you're going to change, and every life is extremely important. So talk a little bit about the power of that, because you talk a little bit about the power of, essentially the butterfly effect, and doing small things and affecting other people's lives. Tell me what that means to you, and tell me how it became that's so important to you.
Yeah. So it's just always been something from that, realizing how it felt to be seen when you weren't seen. And I do believe God kind of has given me a gift. From even as a teenager, I would be walking through the mall, and I would see somebody and think, oh gosh, I should do something nice for them. Sometimes it's a smile. Sometimes I pay for people, I'll be getting my nails done. I'll pay for somebody's nails to get done. Yeah. I've bought people's groceries before. It happens a lot in the grocery store. I've seen people that you knew were sick. Maybe they were going through cancer treatment or something, and I'll buy them flowers. And I never want people to know it's me. I just usually will give it to the manager. But, I'll say, just please tell that person I saw them and they're beautiful. And I hope that this brightens their day a little bit. It's just those little things. And then, there are times just in our lives, whether it's with our families or our friends or, my team at work, those kind of things where, they know it's me that's doing it. But I just really am like, let's just not make a big deal out of it. This is what we're supposed to be doing for each other. We're all on the planet together. Yeah. We're supposed to be making each other's lives a little bit better.
Gina, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. You ready for this? This is important.
Okay. All right.
I had a very, very similar situation where I would buy people lunch, or buy them a coffee, or buy them something. And then I don't know if it was, me feeling, I don't know, the feeling in my head was, oh, I don't want them to know it's me and I'm running out. And then I had a conversation with my good buddy. His name is Brandon Hanley. You should look him up. He's got a great podcast called Spiritual Dope. Big shout out to you, Brandon. Love you. But he put me on blast one day about that. And he said, Jeremy, why do you not want to accept that bit of happiness in your life that you're putting onto somebody else? And he said it way more eloquently than I just butchered the hell out of it there. But it was fascinating, because I thought to myself, you know what? it's okay to do something nice for somebody and accept the feeling and accept their gratitude.
Mhm.
It's almost like I felt like I wasn't worthy enough of that, of their expression back to me. Like I wanted to put it all on them. And then when he said that to me, it almost made it 10x. Like it almost like, I'm gonna buy you lunch today. And they were like, or the person behind me, you know what? Lunch is on me today. And they would look at me like, what? I'm like, why? I'm like, just because. They're like, that's so nice. And I'm like, you know what? I should have been doing this a long time ago, because when you talk about, and this is the challenge. I mean, the challenge is accepting those when you do something for nice and allow them to thank you for it, because yes, it affects them and affects they start affecting other people, but it also affects you. It gives you that extra little bonus of adrenaline, of oxytocin that runs through your body that makes you feel that much better. So I would encourage you, next time you do that, buy someone lunch and then tell them that it was from you, and just see the difference. Because I know, I think you're very similar like me. Like when I thought to myself, well, I don't want to do that. That makes it more selfish about me. And true, it does a little bit, but what's wrong with making yourself feel good for doing a good thing?
Mhm.
So I would encourage you next time to do that. Enough for
Okay.
that. I want to talk a little bit about the book again. How did you come up with the name of the book? Because I think that's interesting too. The Parakeet Drawing. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's that gentleman that spent an hour with me. I was actually hiding underneath a table in the middle of a party. It was the only place that I could be safe, was under this table that had a big tablecloth on it. Um, and it was probably about my third or fourth time of hiding under the table during one of these parties. And this man came under that table with me. And I was coloring as a little girl. I loved to just coloring books. And he saw that I was coloring, and I was terrified. I was trying to figure out, how am I going to get out of here? Am I safer under here with one person or out there with everybody else? And he started talking about the colors I was using, and he taught me how to draw a parakeet. And he made me do it over and over and over. And then he said to me, when you feel scared, when you're worried, I want you to draw the parakeet, and everything is going to be okay. And so, the book goes up to the part of that happening, but then through my adult life, um, in my 20s, when money was tight and I had a bill book, with pay this much on, all the little bills.
Yeah.
I still have the book. If you thumb through it, the parakeet is drawn throughout it, because I was worried there wouldn't be enough money. I went through a time where I had twins, and I was in the hospital, and I was in hospital for quite a long time, and there was a lot of problems. And I had a little journal that I journaled about the journey of what I was going through, and my hopes for them. And the parakeet is drawn in there over and over. And my kids, if they would be fussing about something or yelling and fighting, I would, because that made me nervous, because any kind of loud arguing from my childhood, even as an adult, I just try to avoid. Well, when your
Yeah.
kids are doing it and you're trying to calm them down, I would just draw the parakeet and stick it up on the fridge, so it would,
Yeah.
it just calmed me down. So
Yeah.
that's where the name came from.
Has the person that you met with that day, have you? I mean, are they still with us? Are they?
I have no
That's,
idea.
isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they will read your book, and wouldn't that be wild?
Oh my gosh. I know. I've talked about that with the publisher, of how cool that would be for them to see it.
Well, let's talk real quick to bring the podcast up I did the other day with Keisha. Keisha put on there that she put up her baby up for adoption 22
Mhm.
years ago, and she wrote the book. And then someone that read her book helped her find her son, and she found her son
Oh,
last Monday. I talked to him for the first
oh
time
my
on Thursday.
gosh.
So it's amazing when you start doing these things and you put the message out there to the universe, and all of a sudden things start lining up. I guess you just have to let me know. And if something like that happens, I would love to have you back on the show and to
Yeah.
talk about that, because that stuff does happen, and it happens for a reason. And what we talked about with her is that she might have not have been mentally ready for that experience, for her to have her son back in her life, and maybe it's taken this long for you to get the book out, and then not mentally maybe you are ready for that experience. What would that be like? Like,
Yeah.
what do you think would happen if that happened? What would go through your head? What would you say?
I don't know if I could say anything. It's one of those things where that person has no idea. I mean, they changed who I became as a grown up. They changed who I became as a person. How do you thank somebody for that? It would
It's
it would
wild.
be, yeah, it would be amazing. Amazing.
That's so wild to think that, I like to think that I did that to somebody, but you never know. And, I'm
Yeah.
sure you have, I'm sure I have, I'm sure a lot of people have that the insignificant conversation that you may think is insignificant, but actually changes someone's lives. And that just shows you the power of the human soul and
Yeah.
life. And it's so beautiful and so brilliant that it's hard to put in words
Yeah.
how big of an impact you can have on someone's life.
So true.
Again, we're talking to Gina DeFay. Gina, I'm a big book reader. One of my favorite books of all time is John Maxwell's book, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And he goes through these
Mm.
7 questions. I'm going to fire them at you. Are you ready, Gina DeFay?
Okay. All right.
Question number 1 from John Maxwell's book is, what is the greatest lesson you have ever learned?
Hmm. The greatest lesson is that my truth is not everybody's truth.
What? Explain.
Yeah. I think because of the protection mode that I've been in my whole life, I kind of have my truths, and these are the ways that you're safe and protected, and this is what you can share emotionally, mentally, anything. Um, and I kind of segregated myself in a lot of ways through most of my adult life, just staying in that safety zone.
Yeah.
Um, and when I was able to really allow other people's truths in, and see a different view, because another thing, I've always thought that I'm really open to other people. I'm really open to other people's experiences, but if anything went against how I felt or what I believed, I would just kind of put the wall up and tune it out. So
Yeah.
that's been the biggest one, is to think you're open and you're not. I
Yeah.
really
Right.
realize. Yeah.
Question number 2 is, what are you learning now?
Oh gosh, what I'm learning now is to be calm. To be calm, that for 30 years I have 3 daughters, and I raised them, and they have great lives, and but I'm still in go 100 miles an hour mode, and I'm learning to step back and breathe and enjoy life. That not every single moment of my day I have to be purposeful.
Well, I think that's important to say that, because I think being present is extremely important. And as you've gone through this journey of your life and you've written this book, there are going to be people that are going to want more time with you and to pick your brain. And those are the situations where you don't want to speed through, because
Yeah.
when you realize that that you have a great story to tell, and then you put it on paper and you put your message out to the universe, there are going to be different situations where you are going to have to slow down and actually be present and have weird, difficult conversations. Because I think, if you go back to your childhood, and I think this sounds kind of weird, but it's what I believe, that the higher being, the good Lord, whoever it is, put you and your soul in the situation that you were in because you could handle that situation. And I know it sounds like weird, but uh, for me, it just, he or she, whatever the higher being is, puts the powerful people in the extremely difficult situations to be able to
Mm,
get through them, number one, and then share that story to be inspire others. So
mm.
I think it's important that you do slow down and share that message, because your message is powerful and it needs to be, people need to hear it. And so again, I appreciate you showing it with the millions of people around the world that are listening to the show.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Question number 3 for Gina DeFay is, how has failure shaped your life?
Oh gosh, it has shaped it in making me stronger. Uh, just trusting you can overcome. Failing is like, to me, it almost feels maybe kind of normal. Like, okay, so you failed, now you got to be stronger. How are you going to overcome that? What'd you learn from it? And continuing to go on. Um, I always say there's like 5 things I'm really good at, and about 1 million I'm not. So,
Yeah.
so I'm okay with failure, but I'm not okay of not learning from it.
Do you consider the trauma of your childhood a failure?
No,
I'm just
not at
curious.
all. Yeah, no, I'm like you though. I believe that we're all here for a purpose, and that we all are supposed to go through the things that we go through. Like one thing, I will never call myself a victim. I don't believe that God has victims, and I believe I'm a child of God. But I do believe that I don't know that it was his choice for me to go through that, but what has come from it is good.
Yeah.
Life is good.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many different ways to look at it, and I think it's at the end of the day, there's it's there's so many things to take from your story and stories like yours that there's never really a right answer. There's not like a right answer or a wrong answer. It's what you take of the situation and how you learn from it and how you grow from it. So again, that's another reason why I think it's important to get your message out there and to share it. Question number 4 is, who do you know that I should know?
Oh, so we don't know each other, so this should be easy, right?
Well, you never know. I've heard a lot of different answers. The kicker is you got to make sure we get introduced.
Oh,
Through email, through whatever, one way or another,
okay.
we got to introduce.
Okay. So I think about a friend of mine. His name is Mick White.
What's
He
up,
was a
Mick?
colleague of mine. Yeah, Mick has been fabulous. And he just wrote a training program called the 100-Year Manifesto.
Cool.
That, yeah, is really to think about what will your legacy be 100 years from now.
Oh yeah. Well, that's
Yeah,
kind of cool.
he's been through some stuff too. He's been through his own journey and uh, wanted to help other people again get up and go on and make a difference in their lives.
That it's interesting when you talk about what your legacy is going to be, and that's why I think it's important writing a book as well. I think that leaves a legacy behind. Uh, you should do a podcast. You know it. You ever thought about doing a podcast?
I haven't thought about
Well, I
that.
think leaving a legacy for me is one of the most important things and
Mm.
that's one of the reasons I do the podcast because if knock on wood, I'm going to Vegas tomorrow or on Friday. If something happens to me in Vegas, what happens in Vegas, I don't want to stay in Vegas. But if I do, if I get hit by a bus or whatever the case is, I know my kids can go back and my grandkids can go back and listen to all these podcast episodes of me putting my life out there and having these silly conversations and goofy and inspirational conversations. But that is a legacy that I want to live behind that'll be here forever and ever and ever. I feel sorry a lot of times. I guess not feel sorry. That's a bad word to put it. I'm concerned about people that live their life it's just a normal life, the 9 to 5, clocking in, clocking out. Um, I mean, and that's their life. That's literally their life. And for me, that is no way to live life. I like people that put themselves out there to leave that legacy, to leave that story behind, because it's so, so important. When you're gone, what is left? What story do people get to tell about you? And with you writing a book, your story's going to be out forever. That's why it's so, so important to do that. And I think you should kick around doing a podcast because podcast is a great way to meet awesome people like yourself, but also get your message out to millions of people around the galaxy. Question number 5 for Gina is, what is number 5? Oh, what have you read that I should read?
Hmm. Well, I'm a big fan of the Strengths Finder 2.0 from Tom Rath. Have you read that?
I have not read that.
Okay. Yeah, I love it. It's a book on those strengths. What are your top? There's 34 strengths, so you can get all of them. But and how do you maneuver through life best? What are the things that you're really good at? And when we stay in those spaces, we enjoy what we do. We interact better with people, and then finding the people that have the strengths that we don't have, and how do we allow them to be exactly who they are, but still partner with them so that I do a lot for work with teams and even in my family. I've got one daughter who her number one strength is harmony. A lot of my strengths are around empathy, but harmony is my last strength because I don't mind hashing things out. I don't mind upsetting the room to
Yeah.
have the conversation. And so I'll go to her sometimes and say, hey, I need to have this conversation. And she'll say, okay, here, stay in this space so people feel comfortable. Cause sometimes I can be a little too
Sure.
in their face. So yeah, that's what the Strengths Finder is about, finding where you maneuver best and then partnering with others.
Sounds awesome. That's another great thing about this podcast. I get to hear all kinds of different books. I ask that question for every interview, and I've heard a jillion different awesome books, and there's so many great ones out there. And that's the other thing. We gotta make sure we run over and grab your book. You can run over to GinaTheFade.com and pick up her book, The Parakeet Drawing, a memoir. Question number 6 is, what have you done that I should do?
Oh, have you gone on a helicopter in Hawaii?
I have not. I've never been to Hawaii.
Oh,
That's one of
there's
those
two
10
things.
states. That's one of those 10
There's
states I've been
two.
to.
Perfect. There's two.
Tell me the experience. What is it like? Why do I have to do
Uh,
that?
okay, so I went last year and I took, when my twins graduated from college, that was the graduation trip, was we were going to go over there. My oldest daughter has a networking connection that owns a helicopter company in Maui. And so they got us tickets for two of us to go. And we were all like, well, I don't want to go. You take the ticket. Well, I don't want to go. You take the ticket.
Right.
We were terrified. So I said, okay, I'm buying the other two tickets and we're all going together. So it was, I'm telling you right now, I have chills coming down my arms, just thinking about it and telling you, it was unbelievable. The pilot said, you just want to pretend like you're on a magic carpet. And if you can think like that and look out the window and pretend like you're just on this magic carpet, it was so soothing and fun. And, you see parts of the island that's the only way you can see it. You can't hike into them. You can't drive there. Yeah, it was amazing. And then to share that with my three daughters, it was really cool.
That's pretty damn cool. I've heard another one about Hawaii. I guess there's some sliding thing that there's some waterfall you can slide down in Hawaii. I need to go to Hawaii. That's what I need to do.
That's what you need to do.
Get my ass over there for sure. Question number 7 for Gina. Gina, how can I add value to you?
Well, I think you've added value in the doing the kind acts for people without being secretive about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. I'm gonna do that next time. I think it'll feel a little bit awkward in the beginning, but I get your point. And I think that will help me a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's very awkward. It's very strange, very weird, but I thought it was one of the coolest things I've ever done. And again, I give that shout out to my buddy Brandon Hanley. You should check his podcast out. Again, Spiritual Dope. He's the man, the myth, the legend. Gina, I appreciate you coming on the show. I really do. And it means a lot to me. And I appreciate you being so open and vulnerable, because I know you're going to change lives, and makes a big difference to me. It makes a big difference to all of my guests and all of the people listening all around the world. But tell people where they can find you and how they can connect with you on social media, as well as where they can get your book.
Sure. So the book is on Amazon, and it's also on my website. So GinaDeFay.com. I'm on Facebook as Gina DeFay author. I have a LinkedIn profile as well, just under Gina DeFay.
Well, again, I appreciate you jumping on the show, and make sure we connect, obviously, on all social media sites. That's very, very important. And again, hey, I've been sharing this message a lot lately for everybody listening about childhood trauma. And the more I go down this road, I don't want to say it's common. I think in my book I wrote, it was like something like 2% of people go through that as a child. And man, 2% of however many 100 million people are in this country is a lot of freaking people. And I also want you to also think, while you're listening to these stories, about maybe it's not the childhood trauma. Maybe it's something different, that something else you're working through, and something else you're fighting to get through to the other side. And I think you can take all these stories like Gina's been showing, and her resilience and her willingness to fight through it, to be an example, to show you that there is, for a cheap plug, there is the positive side of all the stuff that you're going through, and you can get through it. I am 100% convinced that you can get through it. And no matter how bad it looks, no one, you think to yourself, no one wants you around. No one wants to hear your story. People need to hear your story. And whether it's today, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's next week, next year, 10 years from now, or in our situation, 20, 30 years later, it's important. Your time will come and you will change lives. Just get through this tough times you're going through. And I got mad love for you. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, make sure you do that. iTunes, leave those 5-star reviews. It allows other people to find the show. I think we got like 170 reviews or something like that, which is awesome. Like the Facebook page. We're creeping over 12,000 or 13,000 people on that page, which is exciting. Again, it just shows this positive side of momentum in a crazy world that we're living in with COVID, people losing their jobs, depression. There is a positive side to all this. I appreciate you watching. Appreciate you listening. You've got greatness within. Like always, this is the positive side.